If you told me 10 years ago that I'd end up being the villain in my own love story, I would have laughed. I used to think I was one of those women who had it all figured out: love, stability, purpose. But somewhere between changing diapers, reheating coffee for the third time, and pretending to laugh at kids' shows, I lost myself. My name's Clara. I'm 28, mother of two, Leo and Ollie, my 6-year-old twin hurricanes, and, until recently, wife to James. Or, as I used to call him, my rock. Only now I realize he was more like the anchor keeping me from floating away, or maybe from flying, depending on how you look at it. James's was a good man. The kind of man every girl's mother prays she'll marry. Steady job, loyal heart, a sense of humor that could calm a storm. We married young, after a very unplanned pregnancy. Surprise twins, as he called them, while I was crying over stretch marks and the fact that my 20s had been hijacked by motherhood. We didn't plan our wedding. We planned our survival. Shotgun vows, swollen feet, and the faint smell of baby powder. I told myself I was happy because, well, I was supposed to be happy. But I wasn't. Not really. I loved my kids, don't get me wrong, but motherhood hit me like a hurricane I didn't sign up for. Everyone said it would come naturally, that I'd just know what to do. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Half the time I was guessing. The other half I was crying in the bathroom, so the kids wouldn't see. And while James handled everything with this irritating calm, like he was born to be a dad, I felt like an imposter in my own life. He'd laugh with the twins, make breakfast, build forts out of couch cushions. Meanwhile, I was silently screaming inside. I'd look at him and think, how is he okay with this being forever? I remember one evening vividly. It was raining outside, the twins were finally asleep, and James was folding laundry. I had a glass of wine in my hand and said, half joking, "Don't you ever wish we could just have a few days without them?" He smiled, that annoying, unbothered smile of his. "That's called school, Clara. Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. I rolled my eyes. "No, I mean really without them. Like just us. No noise. No mess. No responsibility." He just shrugged, like I was being dramatic. But inside, I wasn't joking. I was desperate. Desperate for quiet. Desperate to feel like me again. Somewhere between Leo's tantrums and Ollie's endless why questions, Clara the person had turned into Clara the mom. And I hated admitting it, but I missed being desired. Being spontaneous. Being alive. The first time I met Tom, it wasn't some passionate, movie-style encounter. He was just there. A friend of a colleague at a weekend gathering. He had this easy charm, the kind that made you feel seen even when you didn't want to be. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, but something about him stuck. He was fun. Young. Carefree. Everything I wasn't anymore. We started chatting online. Innocently, at first. A few jokes, a few flirty comments. You know, the kind of thing you tell yourself doesn't mean anything. But soon it became the highlight of my day, those messages. Tom made me feel interesting again. James used to look at me like I was part of the furniture, useful, dependable, unchanging. Tom looked at me like I was fire. I told myself it wasn't cheating if nothing physical happened. But emotionally, I was already halfway gone. The guilt would hit me at night, especially when I'd see James asleep with Leo's little hand clutching his shirt. He was a good dad. The best. And part of me hated him for it. Because while he was thriving in this family life, I was drowning in it. Weeks passed, then months. My restlessness turned into resentment. Every little thing James did started to annoy me, his calmness, his patience, his jokes about the twins' mess. He didn't understand that I was breaking inside. He'd tell me I was beautiful, and I'd roll my eyes. He'd ask me what was wrong, and I'd snap, nothing. But there was something huge. I didn't want this life anymore. One night, I sat him down. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my wine. I told him, "James, I need to discover myself." He actually laughed. "What? Like Dora the Explorer? Should I buy you a backpack?" That hurt, because I was serious. I told him I felt trapped, that motherhood had stolen my youth, my dreams. And instead of listening, he turned it into a joke. I said things I didn't mean and some that I did. I told him I regretted not living more before getting married. I told him I wanted to find myself again. He just looked at me like I'd slapped him. And maybe I had. When I finally said it, "I've been seeing someone." The silence that followed was worse than any shouting could have been. His face went blank, then pale, then angry. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He just looked broken. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the hero of this story. I wasn't even the victim. I was the villain. But I didn't stop. Because I thought I was doing the right thing for myself. I thought if I didn't leave now, I'd end up resenting everyone, including my own children. So I left. I packed a bag, told the twins I was going on a trip, and walked out. James didn't stop me. He just stood there, silent, holding Leo's hand while Ollie cried. That image still haunts me. James in the doorway, two scared kids behind him, and me walking away. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd come back once I'd found myself, that I needed time, freedom, adventure. Tom was waiting outside in his car. I remember thinking, this is my new beginning. But as it turns out, not every new beginning is worth the ending it costs. For a while, life with Tom felt like magic. We traveled. We drank too much. We laughed. I posted pictures of sunsets and cocktails, pretending I'd found happiness. But somewhere in between those glossy photos, something started to crack. Tom was fun but shallow. Every night was a party. Every morning, a hangover. And in those quiet mornings, when he'd still be asleep, I'd scroll through my phone and see pictures of Leo and Ollie on James's page. Halloween costumes. First day of school. A drawing that said, "We love Daddy." And I'd cry. Not just because I missed them, but because I realized they might not miss me. I told myself I could go back whenever I wanted. That James would forgive me eventually. He always forgave me. But the longer I stayed away, the harder it became to face what I'd done. By the time I finally tried calling James, it had been months. He didn't answer. And that's when I realized maybe I hadn't just left my marriage. Maybe I destroyed it. When I left James and the kids, I told myself I was chasing freedom. But the truth is, I was just running away from the life I'd built and from the person I'd become. For the first few weeks, everything felt electric. Tom and I went from one city to another like we were in some indie film about reckless youth. We stayed in fancy hotels, took pictures on beaches, drank champagne for breakfast. I told myself this was what I had missed, that this was what I deserved. But the high doesn't last forever. Freedom, I learned, has an expiration date. It started small. Tom would scroll on his phone while I tried to talk. He'd disappear for hours, and when I asked where he'd been, he'd laugh and say, "You sound like someone's wife." Someone's wife. That used to be something I was proud to be. Now it sounded like an insult. I'd try to ignore it. I'd drown my doubts in wine and selfies. Post another photo with a fake smile and a cocktail, pretending I wasn't unraveling. But no matter how much I drank or danced, there was always this pit in my stomach. Because when the music stopped, the silence was unbearable. I started checking James's profile in secret. At first, just curiosity. Then it became an obsession. Every picture of Leo and Ollie hit me like a punch to the gut. Them playing in the yard. James cooking dinner with them. A caption that read, "Movie night with my boys." That used to be our thing. And the comments, "You're such a great dad. Those boys are lucky to have you." All true, but each one another reminder that I wasn't there. That I had traded bedtime stories for bar nights. I told myself I'd call. I even dialed his number a few times. But I'd hang up before he answered. What would I even say? "Hey, sorry I blew up our family. How's everyone doing?" Yeah, no. Months passed. My new life started to feel like an extended mistake I couldn't undo. And when Tom suggested another trip, this time to Cabo, I didn't want to go. I told him I miss my kids. He laughed. "Clara, you wanted this life. Don't start going all mom mode on me now." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't chasing happiness anymore. I was running from guilt, and it had finally caught up. A few weeks later, James's lawyer emailed me about the divorce papers. My stomach dropped. I knew it was coming, but seeing it written petition for custody made it real. James wasn't just done with me. He was cutting me out completely. I wanted to call him to explain that I wasn't a bad person, just a lost one. But there's no checkbox for emotionally stupid in a custody hearing. The world doesn't care about your intentions when your actions scream otherwise. When I came back to the States for the legal process, I convinced myself I'd fix everything. That maybe if I showed up, James would see I was serious about being part of the boys' lives. But walking into that house again broke me. Leo and Ollie were older, taller, quieter. They stared at me like they weren't sure if I was real. And when Leo finally said, "Mom?" in this small, shaky voice, I almost fell apart. They ran to me, hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I thought, maybe it's not too late. But then, 2 hours later, when I said I had to leave, they cried so hard it felt like my heart was being torn out. Ollie clung to my arm and said, "Stay tonight, please." And I couldn't, because it wasn't my home anymore. When I got to my car, I sobbed until I couldn't see straight. But the next morning, instead of facing that pain, I did what I always do, I escaped. I told myself I'd make it up to them next time. Except next time kept getting delayed. The truth is, I didn't come around much. I'd tell James the first was busy or that I wasn't feeling well. Sometimes I lied. Sometimes I wasn't lying. Because every time I saw the boys, I had to face the wreckage I'd caused, and that was unbearable. James let me see them anyway. I could tell he hated me for it, but he never said anything cruel. He didn't need to. The silence between us said it all. And yet, part of me hoped he'd yell. Yelling would mean he still cared. Instead, he was calm, distant, detached. That hurt more than any insult ever could. When the custody hearing finally came, I thought I could fix everything by being sincere. I told my lawyer, "I've been working on myself. I just need the judge to see that." But when I stepped into that courtroom and saw James sitting there, neat, composed, with folders of evidence, I realized I was out of my depth. His lawyer talked about patterns of absence and instability. My Instagram posts, the ones where I was holding cocktails and grinning at the beach, were displayed on a screen. "Miss Clara," the judge said, "were you working during these trips?" I wanted to vanish. I stammered something about self-growth, but even I didn't believe it. James didn't even look at me while they played my own life as evidence against me. When it was over, the judge's tone softened, almost like he pitied me. He said, "You clearly love your children, but love isn't enough. They need consistency, and you've proven you can't provide that." And just like that, I lost. James got full custody. I got visitation rights. When the decision was announced, I felt my chest cave in. My kids, the same ones I gave up everything for, were no longer mine in any real sense. Afterward, I tried to talk to James, to say something, anything. But he just nodded politely, thanked his lawyer, and walked past me like I was invisible. That night, I sat in a motel room, surrounded by takeout boxes and silence, and finally understood what I'd done. I had spent years blaming motherhood, marriage, and James for my unhappiness, when the truth was, it had always been me. I wanted to feel young again, but I didn't realize youth isn't a time. It's a feeling, one that disappears the moment you start running from responsibility. I tried to visit the kids regularly at first. I even showed up with gifts. But every time I left, they cried so much it physically hurt. Leo once asked, "Why do you keep going away?" I didn't have an answer. Because how do you explain to a 6-year-old that his mother was selfish? After that, I started avoiding visits again. I told myself I was protecting them from disappointment, but really, I was protecting myself from shame. And then, one night, after another canceled visit, I saw a new photo online. James and the boys at a local fair, smiling. He looked happy. Not the forced kind of happy, the real kind. That was the moment I realized he'd moved on. Not romantically, but emotionally. He didn't hate me anymore. He didn't love me either. He just didn't feel anything. And somehow, that hurt most of all. I thought about showing up one day and begging him to forgive me, to give me another chance. But how could I? What could I offer now that I hadn't already destroyed? The truth was, I'd burned every bridge I had. Tom and I broke up not long after. Turns out, once the party's over, there's not much left to say. He wanted fun. I wanted redemption. Those two things don't coexist. After he left, I looked around my apartment, the clothes, the photos, the leftover emptiness, and realized I had everything I thought I wanted. And none of it mattered. So I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I cried for real. Not because I missed Tom. Not even because I lost James. But because I finally understood what it meant to lose your children, not physically, but emotionally. When they stop asking for you. When they stop expecting you to come back. That's when you truly lose them. It's been months since then. I'm trying, really trying, to be better. I've started therapy.
Got a part-time job.
I'm even saving up to get a proper place close to where the boys live. James still lets me see them, though the visits are short. He's polite, distant, but never cruel. I know he's doing it for the kids, not for me. And that's fair. Because the truth is, I don't deserve his kindness. If someone had told me that redemption feels less like a victory and more like a quiet ache, I wouldn't have believed them. But that's exactly what it is. After losing custody, I thought about disappearing altogether. Moving somewhere new. Starting over. Pretending none of it ever happened. But every time I imagined leaving again, I saw Leo and Ollie's faces. Their tears, their confusion, their tiny hands reaching for me, and I couldn't.
So I stayed.
Not in James's life. That door was closed, but in the same town. Same grocery store. Same school district. Close enough to see the boys sometimes. Far enough not to disturb their stability. At first, I didn't know how to exist in this half-life. Seeing them every few weeks felt both like a blessing and a punishment. The first few visits were unbearable. Leo would chatter nonstop, trying to fill the silence, while Ollie stayed quiet, watching me carefully, like he wasn't sure if I was real this time. The second I had to leave, they'd cry, and I'd promise I'd be back soon. And I was. For a while. Then I missed one visit because of work. Then another because I couldn't face James's cold politeness. Then another because I was afraid of the look in Ollie's eyes, that silent disappointment I had earned. Before I knew it, months passed. One night, I got a text from James. The boys asked if you're coming this weekend. Should I tell them yes or no? I stared at it for nearly an hour before replying. Tell them I'm sorry. I'll make it up to them. He didn't reply. And that silence said everything. That was my breaking point. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, tired, with eyes that had cried too many times, and realized I couldn't live like this anymore. Not as the woman who ran away. Not as the mother who kept disappointing her own children. So I made a promise. Not to James. Not even to Leo and Ollie. To myself. If I ever wanted to earn even a sliver of forgiveness, I had to show up. Every single time. No excuses. The next weekend I went. James opened the door, surprise flickering across his face. I think he didn't expect me to come anymore. The boys, though, they screamed when they saw me. They threw themselves into my arms, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself believe I could be part of their world again. We played board games. Baked cupcakes. Leo got frosting everywhere. Ollie drew a picture of all four of us, stick figures holding hands. He wrote "Mum" under mine. I almost cried right there. After that day, I didn't miss a single visit. I showed up even when it rained, even when I was sick, even when my car broke down and I had to take a bus. I was late sometimes, but I came. Always. And slowly, things began to change. The boys started trusting me again. They didn't ask if I was coming next time, they just knew I would. They started hugging me without hesitation. Laughing with me. Talking about school, their friends, their favorite superhero. Every smile was a small miracle. James, on the other hand, stayed polite but distant. He'd open the door, nod, then disappear into the kitchen while I spent time with the kids. Sometimes we'd talk mostly about schedules, homework, things like that. but nothing personal. It hurt, of course, seeing him every week, knowing how much I'd ruined. But I didn't expect forgiveness anymore. I just wanted to make sure our children never doubted my love again. Months passed like this. A quiet, fragile rhythm. Then one evening, after the boys had gone to bed, James asked if I could stay a few minutes. He wanted to talk about Leo's upcoming school project. We sat at the kitchen table. The same one we'd once eaten dinner at together as a family. The same one where I'd told him I was leaving. The silence between us was heavy. He finally spoke first. "You've been consistent. I'll give you that." I nodded. "It's the least I can do." He leaned back, arms crossed. "The least?" I hesitated. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm trying." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of the man I used to know. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "You can't undo the past, Clara," he said quietly. "You can't erase what happened." "I know," I whispered. I want to be better. For them." He nodded once, stood up, and said, "That's all that matters." I thought that was the end of it. But as I was putting my coat on, I felt this sudden wave of emotion. Before I could stop myself, I said, "James, I broke up with Tom." He froze, his hand still on the doorknob. "Okay. I just thought you should know," I said weakly. "It's over. For good."
He didn't respond.
I kept talking because silence has always scared me more than anger. "I thought I wanted that life," I continued, voice trembling. "But I didn't. I thought I was chasing happiness, but really, I was just running from the person I became after the twins were born. And I blamed everyone, you, motherhood, everything, except myself." James finally turned to face me. His eyes weren't angry, just tired. "I'm not saying this because I expect anything," I added quickly. "I know what I did is unforgivable. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I'm sorry." He was quiet for a long time before saying, "You should tell them that someday. Not now, but when they're older. They deserve to know the truth." His words hit hard, but they were fair. I nodded. "I will." Then, because my brain doesn't know when to stop sabotaging me, I asked the question I shouldn't have. "Do you think we could ever try again? For them?" He sighed, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his expression. Sadness, maybe nostalgia. But then he shook his head. "No, Clara. We can co-parent. We can be civil. But that part of us? It's gone. You ended it." I wanted to argue, to say people change, to beg. But instead, I just whispered, "I understand." He nodded once and said, "Good night, Clara." And that was that. When I got into my car, I didn't cry. Not that night. I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, and realized something I'd never admitted before. Forgiveness isn't something you get from someone else. It's something you earn by becoming someone different. I drove home that night feeling strangely calm. Not happy, but peaceful. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't lying to myself anymore. I was no longer trying to be the woman I used to be, the carefree, reckless version of me that thought happiness meant escape. I was learning to be the woman who shows up, who takes responsibility, who rebuilds quietly without asking for applause. Weeks turned into months. I kept showing up. I found a steadier job, saved money, got a small flat near the boys' school. The first time they came over to visit, they helped me unpack boxes and stuck their drawings on my fridge. Leo said, "Now we can visit you at your house, Mom." And I smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. My house."
James drops them off sometimes.
We still don't talk much, but the tension has softened. Once, he even stayed for coffee while the boys showed him their new video game. We laughed, genuinely, about Leo's competitive streak. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was peace. Sometimes, when I put the boys to bed at my flat, I look at them and wonder how I ever thought my freedom was worth losing this. The little hands clutching mine. The sleepy smiles. The way Ollie whispers, "Love you, Mum," before drifting off. That's what I was chasing all along. Not freedom. Not youth. Just feeling alive again. And somehow, I found it. Not in a beach bar or a stranger's arms, but here, in this tiny apartment, folding my kids' clothes while they sleep in the next room. I still have bad days. Days when the guilt crawls back. When I see James smiling and wonder if I'll ever stop being the woman who broke his heart. But then Leo giggles or Ollie tells me about his art project, and I remember I may have lost my marriage, but I'm still their mother. And this time, I'm not running from that. Ever again. Epilogue, a quiet redemption. It's been over a year since that night in James's kitchen. We've both moved on in our own ways. He's still single, as far as I know, and I've stopped looking for love anywhere else. My life isn't glamorous anymore. It's simple. But it's real. And every time I look at Leo and Ollie, I remind myself, I don't need forgiveness to be the mother they deserve. I just need to keep showing up. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes you don't get a second chance at love, but you can always earn one at redemption. And that's enough for me.